look, we brought him here to talk about PSVR2.
Oh no.
Let's talk about the PSVR2. Gray, I have been hotly anticipating this conversation because I just within a short arm's reach of me is the PlayStation VR1, something that I did not. Oh, it's so pretty. For if you're just listening,
So
go over to
gorgeous.
the YouTube and see it. And oh, it's so pretty.
It is worth noting that it's gorgeous. It
It is
looks
a
like
gorgeous piece of tech.
Japanese, like
How
a
heavy
nice.
is it?
It's almost as heavy as the PSVR one. It's really not that different.
Okay. So yeah, I own the PSVR one, but it was a piece of hardware that I used a lot for a couple weeks, and then it collected dust so much so that I gave it to my brother to have for multiple years, and he just gave it back to me a few weeks ago, and I've still not plugged it back in. So I want to hear general impressions. I kind of want to just like hand it over to you and let you monologue as much as you want about it, and we'll interject with questions. But my biggest question now, knowing that you also had PSVR one, how big of an improvement is it from the first one?
I have to start by saying I don't just have PSVR one. I loved it. Like I still love it. There are so many experiences that are unique to PSVR one I still would say to this day, depending on who you are, it's worth it. Like I can definitely still see value in a PSVR one, even if you're playing it on a PS5. I swear to God, it did so many things right with so many things in its software library. VR's come a long way. Look, that was 6 years ago, I think, right? Maybe 5, but it's come a long way since then. But that really felt like bleeding edge at the time. Like we're gonna get better. And I guess that's where I have to talk about PSVR 2, where I thought it was going to be that next step. And it's really it is in terms of hardware and image fidelity. But like you look at your cell phone, I mean, 2 years ago, you were taking pictures at 9 megapixels? You coward. You sit at that table. Like, no, it's plenty, right? There's sort of this limiting, what's the term I'm looking for? It just doesn't. PSVR 1 wasn't quite good enough, but it was good enough to have great experiences. But you could see that what you really needed to do was upgrade the hardware just a little bit to make the games that already existed really shine, right? Gran Turismo Sport is a really good example because they couldn't do what they're doing now in Gran Turismo 7, which everybody seems to be saying is like a flagship title for the PSVR 2, because you can do everything in VR in the entire game. First of all, that's not true. You can drive in VR. Everything else is not in VR. It's just on this virtual screen, including your pit stops, including the start, and every race has non-VR in it. And it's kind of jarring the way it goes back and forth.
Interesting.
The PSVR 1 was sort of limited by the hardware in that you couldn't race more than one car, but I still loved it. I loved the experience of it. It worked great with the steering wheel. I think that's where virtual reality shines in general, is any sort of simulation where your interaction is one-to-one. It's one thing to have a wand that sort of simulates, or a controller that simulates what you're doing, but to have a wheel that turns one-to-one, every single angle works right. If you're flying, a joystick and a throttle and stick, everything works, and it looks like what you're looking at. It's a little off. That's okay. But it's close enough that your mind doesn't really know or care about the difference. There is no flight simulator on PSVR 2 to date. When y'all talked about it 2 weeks ago, came and said, yeah, if I wanted to go play Super Hot or Beat Saber, that's cool. And I immediately wanted to scream because those two games aren't on PSVR 2. They were on PSVR 1. Right. That's what I said. Beat Saber is coming. I don't know if it's going to be an upgrade. I don't care. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's not here now. They really screwed up the launch.
I am shocked right now. I would have guaranteed you those two games, Super Hot and Beat Saber, would have been on PSVR 2. That is absurd.
Look at me being wrong for the first time in forever.
I didn't mean it that way, Cayman. I love you to death. But yeah, you were wrong. Grow up. Roll Tide. Get it right next time. But that's my biggest problem with the PSVR 2. Did you guys see the movie Knives Out?
Yeah, loved it.
Okay. The Porsche that the rich billionaire owns on this secluded island that he keeps on the roof of his mansion because there's no roads on the island. That's what PSVR 2 is. It's a gorgeous car that when everybody sees it and goes, you're rich, even if you're not, they think you're rich, and you can't really do anything with it in spite of the fact that it's capable of doing some amazing things. Okay, if you had a private driveway, maybe you could race it up to 100 miles an hour. So you can push the PSVR 2 a little bit, but not nearly what it's designed for, like what it's capable of. And what really bugs me about that is, don't forget, Sony, I thought, learned their lesson with backwards compatibility when the PS4 wasn't backwards compatible with PS3 and all their other titles. They made everything PS5 backwards compatible, right? That makes sense. I get the argument that PSVR 2, it's different. No wonder it's not backwards compatible. You should have known that was coming. This wasn't a surprise. The virtual reality space has all these ubiquitous experiences that are cross VR platforms, right? So super hot. You're blown away. You can play that on your phone with, what is it, Cardboard, the Google thing that you just put on your head. You can play that. You can play Quest. You can play it on PC VR. You can play it on Valve Index. You can play it basically everywhere, including PSVR, not PSVR 2. These games really move quickly between VR platforms. And to not be prepared for PSVR 2, what blows me away is what they did so right with PSVR 1. I can't believe it's the same people who screwed this up and nobody seems to notice that it's happening on PSVR 2.
That's insane.
There were these demo discs that were great. They had, it's just an experience. Okay, the experience of being in a cage underwater with a shark was rad on a PSVR 1. But to show people it for the first time, isn't that the reason why you developed it for a console in the first place? But now you can do it in 4K instead of this fidelity problem that caused people motion sickness. It was not at a baseline level it needed to be. That's what the PSVR 1. It wasn't there in most experiences. In some of them, it was transcendent. It was brilliant. It was just as good as any other VR experience, and including to date. The problem with the PSVR 2 isn't the hardware. It's better, but nothing's using that. And the state of play that PlayStation didn't exactly show anything that's going to use the PS5 to showcase what it's capable of. Gran Turismo 7 does it, but to be honest, to be completely literal and fair, the experience of Gran Turismo 7 is design-wise identical to Gran Turismo Sport in VR. The fidelity is better. Yeah, you can race more cars, but the truth is, most of the time you're not racing other cars. They're on the track with you, but you're having the same experience, just upgraded, I guess. You're still missing the same in-race data. They didn't change it. You still can't access best lap data, which we use for a racing series every Friday night. So we need somebody who's not in VR to keep scoring. You can't tell what tires anybody else is on or where they're at on the track to plan your pit strategies. And I'm being picky. I'm not trying to say anything other than that.
You paid $550. I think you can be picky.
That's another thing that was really weird about the way people perceive PlayStation VR 2. Excuse me. Look, alone, it's going to pay for itself. I'm in a racing league. We play every Friday night across continental lines. We play with people in Canada and in New Zealand. It's great. I love it. But to keep the tracking, we need somebody outside of VR because they didn't change the ability to collect that data in VR. It's that same experience. And I mean that in a good way to PSVR 1. PSVR 1 was transcendent. It blew everything away. The way the PSVR 2 is being reviewed, from what I've heard, is that same thing. And it is not that to me. I love it. And it's not that to me. I don't understand. You mentioned the price. Why doesn't the PS5 have that? People knocked the PSVR 2 down because of the price. It costs too much, so we're going to knock it down a notch. Why wouldn't you do that for the PS5, which requires a TV, by the way? Like, you have to spend $800 to $1,500 or more to be able to experience it, right? Like, if you want 4K, which I still don't have. So how did you even review this thing without spending that extra money? I digress. It's a side effect of it is a better system, but it has all the same problems with any virtual reality system.
Sure.
And the cable is the ultimate outlier. It's this tether that doesn't need to be there. The only reason why you have a tether is to produce the best possible technological experience, right? Who makes the best games? Who is the best selling console right now? We all know the truth. Just say it.
I mean, it's mostly the Switch.
It's Nintendo Switch. Would anybody by any metric say the Nintendo Switch is the most powerful thing you can buy out there to play video games on?
Abso-fucking-lutely not.
So it's not the point, right? It's all about software. It is entirely about software. That's what the PSVR 1 had. That's what backwards compatibility would give you. What's really frustrating to me is the PSVR doesn't even have, the PSVR 2, excuse me, doesn't even have like this upgrade in sensibility. Like when you turn it on, you go through the motions of setting it up, and then you're immediately staring at a giant virtual screen. You're not in a virtual space. You're not in virtual reality.
Interesting.
You're just looking at a screen. Every other system right now has that. If you buy a standalone MetaQuest 2 or the MetaQuest Pro, any of those systems, you're in a virtual space looking at a menu. It's all intuitive, but you feel like you're in a virtual space.
Yeah.
The
You're going
PS5,
to a new world.
Of course, it has no problem producing that stuff, right? In 4K even. It's like they just forgot the simplest things. It's owning that Porsche in Knives Out and not even having a fucking driveway to race it on. Nothing.
So this has all been, I'm a bit shocked, if I'm being honest.
Yes.
But my first question is, so you've talked about Gran Turismo. What all have you played on it so far in the few weeks that you've had it?
I've done a lot of testing, including the PSVR 1 on a PS5, which is interesting.
Okay.
Sony, they gave me a free adapter, and I had to apply for it way before the PSVR 2 even was released. And I got it for free in the mail, and it works just fine. Like, it's really interesting the way that Sony has been deliberate about supporting the virtual reality space. Originally, it was titled Morpheus, which I just thought was a great name, right?
It's a cool name.
The PSVR looked great. The PSVR used these Move controllers that you could use for more than just virtual reality. And I thought a lot of people complained that the tracking wasn't that great. Okay, we can update that. You can track your phone better now because the system itself has infrared cameras on it. You know, the reviews say the pass-through is black and white. It is black and white, but technically it's infrared. So if you look at your phone screen, you'll see a red light blinking, a white light, I should say, of course, all the time when your screen is off. It's just blinking when you're looking at it through the PSVR 2. There's this ability to change what you do with it that they just completely ignored. And I can't really understand how they missed the mark there because the support for the PSVR 1 was so deliberate and clearly deliberate, right? They talked about it when they were talking about the PS5. Do you guys remember this press conference? I can't remember his name. The guy who looked like Dana Carvey with the glasses.
Oh,
and they talked about the rewrite. You remember that, right?
Yes.
The rewrite times with the hard drive.
Man,
the
if you
hard
didn't
drive
ask me, I
stuff.
could have said.
That was the most boring. That was the most boring thing I've ever sat through.
Really? I was fascinated by it.
Of course you were. Of course you were.
I'm
Mark
old
Cerny is
and
who we're thinking
slowly
of.
dying.
Yes,
right?
Mark Cerny. Yeah.
He talked about deliberately the 3D audio system, which was sort of designed for virtual reality rather than explicitly designed for virtual reality. But they everything anybody ever says about the haptics on the DualSense PS5 controller, that came from virtual reality, from PSVR 1. They wanted that for PSVR 2, so they developed it. Now, mind you, it's a different motor system for PSVR 2 versus the DualSense, but it was designed and explicitly made for this experience. I wish, we were just talking about delays. I swear to God, I mean, and I hate to say this, I wish PSVR 2 had been delayed for them to get this software shit right and make it a mass market product from the very moment you push start, because it's a console system-based enterprise for virtual reality. Sure. It's the most ubiquitous and streamlined system that you can buy for virtual reality, and it still feels like a fucking computer.
It's shocking to me because that's always been the thing that has set PlayStation apart from its lead competitor, Xbox. Obviously, Nintendo is the best. It's on its own island, but it's always been the war between Sony and Microsoft. And the thing that so many people, myself included, in high school, I was an Xbot, and that's just because what we had. Like, my folks got us an Xbox 360, so I was like, Xbox is the best. And then I found podcasts, and I'm listening to video game podcasts, and I'm hearing about these games like Uncharted and God of War, these games that I just like had kind of missed the ball on. And suddenly I'm looking at all of these titles that I can't play on an Xbox. And what did it do? It got me to go on eBay and buy a PS3 used that then died a month later. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go buy a new one because I want to play these games so badly. And it's
Right.
always been their thing. It's the thing that sets PlayStation apart from Xbox. Xbox has Game Pass. They have a great library that you can get for $15 a month. Sony has God of War. It has The Last of Us. It has Ratchet and Clank. It has Spider-Man. I can go on and on and on. And for the fact that the PSVR 2 doesn't lean into that is mind-blowing to me.
So I guess my question is, so I'm curious. I wonder if the reason that we are where we are, right, is because Sony doesn't want to take like their mainline developers, people like Guerrilla, people like Insomniac or Naughty Dog, and they don't want them to jump in to be like, we want you to dedicate a AAA's game's worth of time, energy, and money to develop games that are for, and no offense to Gray, but like a select group of people. Let's be honest. I can't physically afford to go out and get a PSVR 2 right now. And, but like one of the reasons I would be more enticed to is if there was experiences. Sure, we do have Call of the Mountain, which was kind of like they're like the main release. It was like, this is the game you have to play. But then reviews came out and it was like, this game kind of is all right. It's fine.
I think the reviews were favorable. I
Really?
love Horizon. I think as a virtual reality experience, it's really great because it's a branded experience that you recognize. You kind of give it a little bit more push. I have no problem with that. It's a nice little vitamin. What Horizon does is this focus system where you have an augmented reality, an AR in the video game world all the time. It's integrated with the narrative, and it's not present in this flagship launch title that you're charging $60 for. That is a first party exclusive.
What?
Again, it feels like they missed it. Oh, it's a climbing simulator. I don't even have a problem with that. Well, you're not Aloy, so you don't have a focus. Okay, without spoiling the results of a 6-year-old game to date, the sensor, it's not exactly uncommon. They have thousands of them, long story short. So that's not the problem, to give somebody in this game world a focus where you can create an AR inside VR. Again, they missed the mark.
That is absurd.
Not like a hardware limitation. This is a choice that they missed. Simple as that.
Because I didn't do a lot of watching of gameplay or anything like that, because one, I do kind of get a little queasy when I watch other people doing VR, not so much when I'm doing it myself. So I didn't really watch stuff. I would have thought that was a slam fucking dunk that a lot of this game is around a focus. I'm like kind of speechless right now to learn that is not part of the Call of the Mountain.
You know what
Isn't that
grills
weird?
me?
That is weird.
It would be something that everybody would be talking about, or a RoboCop game, which they're developing, by the way. But I have no idea and don't expect it to be developed this way. But to create an AR and VR is one thing. It would be great. To create it from Horizon, it is so integral to the game, and like I said, the narrative itself.
Right.
How did they miss? How did somebody not go? Are you guys not gonna do the focus? Like, really?
You know what burns me up? What burns me up the most, I think, from this conversation isn't that PSVR 2 exists, but that Sony has put so much emphasis on VR being like the next big thing. When if you look over at Nintendo, they are fucking crushing it right now with the Switch, and we can't get a Vita 2. That it was like, look, instead of supporting PlayStation VR in the first place, we're just going to make a new one. Hope people line up in droves to get it. Then there was also the issue where, from my understanding, is like the supply of them is very limited as well.
It's not, by the way, they didn't run out of pre-orders. It wasn't like the PS5. And to your point, though, I'm trying to figure out, honestly, I mean this sincerely, maybe they were trying to get the fire burning, so to speak, right? Because they knew these supply problems were going to be bigger than they expected. I don't know. Something about all of this doesn't make sense. I say something, a lot of it, an awful lot, including the very initial experience for every PSVR2 owner, feels like a missed opportunity at best. And I still love it. For Gran Turismo 7, it really is amazing. But again, that's specific. To build a a virtual reality system for a console, you're trying to deliberately make it for the masses. That's what it felt like they did for PSVR 1. It came with Astrobot, which was incredible. I didn't know what Astrobot, I didn't care before. The PSVR made Astrobot something that I cared about in the way that the Heart Box was in Portal, right? Yeah. Like, it just came out of nowhere. Now I love it. I can't wait to see it again. Can't even test it. The reality of not having a backwards compatible catalog is something I can swallow in spite of spending a fortune on PSVR 1 for a library that doesn't exist right now.
Yeah.
I can get it, but I really kind of don't. I don't understand how they were okay with not making that a priority, because that was where Sony... There was a game called Blood and Truth, and we were talking before about delays. There was Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, and the sequel, the sort of spiritual sequel, comes out this week, right? It was delayed back in January, which wasn't that long ago. It's called, what's it called? Why can't I remember? Switchback VR, excuse me. Like, there's a Switchback non-VR? No, there isn't. And it's derivative, but I'm excited about it. It's horror-based. It's going to be scary. It's going to use the 3D auto really well. Yeah. Your controllers, all of that stuff in a way that I can't test. And I still can't. To not have a single flight sim on any virtual reality sim at launch, it doesn't... I cannot, in case you can't tell, I'm flabbergasted. I really can't believe Sony, because of what they did with the PS Pro, because of the support that they were showing and the money and everything they did around the PS5 to try to support virtual reality, isn't there at launch is baffling.
Here's a question. There's a game that I recently learned about. I think they actually showed it at that most recent State of Play. I think if it wasn't that one, it's the one before. Before Your Eyes. Is it? Have you played that? Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah. Guess what? I played a long time ago with a webcam. Okay, it's not a new experience. Sure. Alumet is a really nice narrative experience that's in VR that isn't unique to PlayStation, that isn't there. There are so many. Look, everybody's glossing over. Oh, there's 40 titles, Gray. What the hell? Grow up. You're rich. You have a PSVR 2. What? Shut up. Like, really? This should be something for everybody. I'll give you a better example. YouTube TV, not YouTube TV, YouTube, just YouTube has a 360 virtual video. It's built in to the system where you can watch it in every other virtual reality system but PSVR 2. That's something where you can take to a classroom and take your kids to the Louvre and show them around, or watch an NFL game from field level in 180 degrees, or watch a rhinoceros on the Serengeti. And it sounds geeky and stupid. That's not what VR is about. I'm like, well, then why did you make it for a console system, right? Why did you make it? Like, in all sincerity, roll tide to my brother Bennett out there. Part of me right now wishes I'd spent that money on a PS5 for him to be playing games with them on the internet instead of waiting for something else while I play Gran Turismo 7 every Friday.
Yeah.
The software is a huge, entirely ubiquitous miss. Superhot VR is on every platform. Look, what you need to understand first about virtual reality in general is there's two systems. Oh, no, there was way more. No. They work in two different ways, inside out or outside in. Outside in is when you have a camera and you have to dedicate lights to tracking your system, right? That's outside in. That's what PSVR 1 was. Inside out is your camera is attached to whatever system you're using to track where your devices are and where you are in a relative space for 3 dimensions. That's what PSVR2 is. Okay, why are these games on every other system that's ubiquitous to VR and not on PSVR2? The system can handle it, not just handle it, but maybe even make them shine. And instead, what we get is Horizon, where we climb a lot and you don't have focus. Gran Turismo 7, which is great, but really just a graphical fidelity upgrade from the exact same design-wise experience as Gran Turismo Sport that we've been playing for over 3 years. I'm trying to remember another, like, what's another launch title that makes sense like that? It is hugely... something went wrong.
Something we've talked about on the show, you kind of mentioned earlier was, oh yeah, there's like 40 titles, but of the 40 titles, only like 4 or 5 of them are new games. Not new to PSVR2, because all of them are new to PSVR2, just new games. Everything else is ports. So the one thing that feels
worse though, some of the ports, like No Man's Sky, which I love, the resolution has not been updated. So you've got a 4K display, but in the distance, I go, what the hell is wrong? Why does it look like square garbage for things that I'm trying to scan in the distance? Now it's cool. Instead of pushing a button to scan, you touch the side of your visor. Like, it can detect that. It's very intuitive, but the graphic fidelity, I expect it to be there later because it's not pushing the PS5 right now. I know it's a really intense game, but that's not the issue. Don't forget, the only real difference, the PSVR 1 and PSVR 2, and if you didn't know, they have a 90 hertz to 120 hertz refresh rate. That's super high.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It just had a lower resolution. The PSVR 1 was basically 1080p, and the PSVR 2 is 4K. So what are we missing for these experiences to not be better? It does help inescapably with motion sickness to people who are prone to it. Again, the PSVR 1 was just not ready. It wasn't what I would call a baseline for an industry standard for virtual reality. PSVR 2 is way ahead of that. Again, like the Porsche. You don't need to have a car that can go 200 miles an hour to sit on your roof. It's not doing the most basic stuff.
Sure.
I used to use my PSVR 1. My girlfriend would be watching the one television we had, and I would lay on the couch and watch a movie on a giant virtual screen staring up at the ceiling because I didn't need a TV. You should be able to do the same thing with a PSVR 2, and you can to a certain degree. But those systems, Netflix, Hulu, they were supported. They're not there now. YouTube, how did they miss that? How is 360 video not something that we're all showing off in 4K? Like, I don't get it. I just don't get it. I don't get it.
The one thing that fills me with hope is that it seems like as you've said, the hardware is there. It's the software. So hopefully in 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, 12 months, you'll be singing a different tune because you'll have a library. But what I will say is, as someone who, I didn't regret buying PSVR 1, but because of my experience with PSVR 1, I was not, I wasn't planning on buying PSVR 2 at the beginning. Now I am certainly not planning on buying it anytime soon. I will be waiting for there to be more software, because that's the reason you buy it, right? Is the software. And if that's not there, then, and then it's like, it's a circular issue. Well, if I'm not going to buy it, I'm sure there are other me's out there. So does that mean it's not going to be supported? I don't know, but that's Sony's problem. That's not my problem.
If it was backwards compatible, I would be an a-hole. Cayman, you would hate how much I'm begging you to get a PSVR 2 right now to play Rec Room, like to just play disc golf inside of a game. Like, it's dumb how much fun we were able to have at a very rudimentary level on PSVR 1 that's just gone on PSVR 2. And again, it's ubiquitous across all other virtual reality systems. Like, you're not pushed. The whole idea of the requirement of having a plug into a console like the PS5 means, like you mentioned, Patrick, like, okay, in 6 months to 12 months, we'll have more experiences. The idea behind needing a PS5 level experience, if they were going to have, for example, that big of a title, a Call of Duty, right? Or something that big, that would be transcendent, that would be something to sell it behind, or NCAA football, God forbid, something. First of all, they would have announced it. You don't keep that a secret. You can develop it forever. And trickle down sales for the system in the meantime. I have not seen announcements like that. The state of play was just last week. They showed 5 games. The first 5 games were virtual reality games for the PSVR2, and they looked like any other experience I've ever had on PSVR1 or PCVR.
They all look like the same game.
They didn't look like, oh, this is why I got a PS5 so I can do VR in this kind of like, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I bring it up because we've seen it done in PC VR with these other games. We're talking about Resident Evil. There's been modders making this work for PC VR for years. You can play every Half-Life game, Portal. You can play every Resident Evil game and the remakes in virtual reality. And it's bigger than you could possibly expect. And a PS5 can do all of that and more, right? It's a super powerful, impressive system that's streamlined and doesn't have these issues because that's what they did so great with making it a console. But there's no software. There's no road to drive it on. It's mind-boggling. I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm speechless, obviously. I just can't believe it. The PSVR 1 blew me away. That's what I'm the opposite from you. It made me compelled to want to get a PSVR 2. Mind you, just Gran Turismo 7 was enough for me. That is very specific. Everybody else grading it on everything else, and it is not even, again, like I mentioned, it's not perfect in Gran Turismo 7 either. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's still great, but I can't, if it was backwards compatible, I would be an asshole about telling people to get it. Like, it's worth it. Try it. It's going to grow. I know it's going to grow. I think it's going to grow because of what they did last time. I don't know who to tell at all. That I don't even know who to show this to right now. It's great because you can take it to somebody's house and plug one plug in if they have a PS5 and show it to them. I'm not compelled to do that. I took a flight with the PSVR 1 and all those stupid cables. Guess what? Cables they're labeled with numbers, you dummies. Like, it wasn't that complicated to plug the thing in and figure it out. Oh, it was cumbersome, but I had it in a corner. I had a dedicated VR space. So once it was set up, I didn't need a TV. I didn't need to care about that stuff. For racing, you've seen racing rigs. They're furniture now. I don't need all that stuff. It doesn't need to be in front of a TV. For me, doing it in VR is way less hassle than moving my desk, lowering the monitor, and getting everything lined up right just for this racing experience. I loved it. Don't get me wrong. It's so much easier. And you had that ubiquity in PSVR 1 that just doesn't translate. And I can't believe it. I just can't believe they screwed it up.
I can't believe it either, Gray. But I definitely want to bring you back on soon, or maybe not soon, but whenever we have more games, because I want to see if your song has changed at all. Because
it's Thursday. I really am excited about Switchback.
I love Rush of Blood, but what I want is a reason to go get it, and I'm not hearing that reason yet, but I hope to hear it soon. But thank you for enlightening us of all of your PSVR2 hands-on impressions.
I feel guilty. I love PSVR 1 so much. I really just wanted to be the asshole who was just, I got it at launch. You guys have got to get it. I wish you'd have gotten it at launch. It's just not what it is, right? Yeah. It's not.
Damn. Well, it might turn into that in the future.